I put together a slideshow to walk through them with you since this is first reading. Presentation and ordinances regarding bias crime, that was A. Illegal discrimination was B. And penalties for violations of chapters 9.16 of the Jackson Municipal Code, that was ordinance C. So the purpose of this item is for council to consider adding these three ordinances that we just went through. The first of which adds a new chapter, 9.27. The second of which is going to amend your existing chapter, 9.26. And the third of which is going to amend numerous sections of 9.16 involving battery, unlawful contact or touching, and assault. So background for this, in 2018, the town enacted an ordinance that protected discrimination based on actual or perceived sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression, association with a person or group so identifying, and even on the belief that the person has a particular sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression, even if that's incorrect. There were the three arenas that were covered were employment, housing, and public accommodations. And at the town council retreat on February 8th, the council identified this issue as one of their priorities for action in 2023 and scheduled it for August, which we took care of. On August 21, the council made a few different directions to staff, which was adding the bias crime. And for that, we added certain characteristics that were enumerated in three other codes in the state of Wyoming. We also added pregnancy status. Second, you asked that if research indicated other common characteristics that were protected, we provide those in your draft ordinance. Three, you wanted to set the penalty for a bias crime at the maximum of the town's authority, which is a fine of up to $750. Going to jail for a maximum of up to 6 months, or both of those items together, some combination. You also directed to amend the code so that other crimes involving actual or perceived threat and violence against individuals have the same maximum penalty, which they currently do not. That is assault, battery, unlawful contact, or touching. And then you wanted to amend the provision of the code that we already had that prohibits discrimination in housing and public accommodations to include these additional characteristics that were more broad for bias crime, because at the time they only included gender expression, gender identity, and sexual orientation. So to go through these, the characteristics that were included, again, were from the three ordinances. The additional one that I had determined was relatively common, though not in every ordinance, is being unhoused. Commonly it used to be called homelessness. So this is relatively common. We added that in. So you'll see that in your bias crime, your new chapter 9.27 for your bias crime. For the penalty, consistent with discussion, the draft you see makes the penalty the maximum authority. Shot there. In terms of penalty for crimes involving actual or threatened violence, for those three additional things, assault, battery, and unlawful contact, we adjusted that penalty. No surprise there. And the third one, we amended the existing illegal discrimination to add these other characteristics. One thing notably about this, because the direction was to add the maximum penalty when there is violence or threatened violence against an individual, this provision does not include the maximum penalty because it doesn't involve violence or threatened violence. It's basically a denial of service. So we kept this in line with council's standard direction that the general penalty in the town is a fine for a maximum up to $750. Since it does not involve violence or threatened violence against an individual, I kept the penalty the same as your standard penalty, which is what it was previously.